Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome. I got a bit of a mess going on. Don't mind all this right here. For one reason, good or bad or another, I just felt like, um, or at least last night, I just had this epiphany that charging handles were getting on my nerve. I'll cover that once I get a couple of charging handles that are coming in, hopefully by the end of this week, as well as gonna get a ambi safety selector on my CMMG Resolute as well. But the title of this video, as you probably already saw, is gonna be under A Tale of Two ARs. Gonna go through basically what was my thought process in 2020 when I was looking for my first AR-15 here, which is the Resolute. So here it is for the upper there, and the lower is right next to it over here. But like I said, I got a bit of a mess of things going on here. And then my latest acquisition here for the Zero Delta, which is probably just gonna be all in the way here. But let's see if we can frame this a little bit better for y'all to see. If that looks better for the camera. But that being said, I'm starting on the CMMG first. My thought process, at least back when I first started shooting in 2020, of which I was getting just really more acquainted with handguns at the time, just doing pistol shooting, trying to refine myself on that, pick up all the points I could on grip, which is something I'm still refining on even years later. And sights was a big thing, getting comfortable enough to switch over to a red dot, which I think has improved my accuracy significantly, but it's also something that, at least with my dots, that you constantly have to monitor your zero. At least the ones that I have to mount are bottom mounted for the battery. So yeah, the shifts in zero could be drastic whenever you have to change batteries. And even just in time, you know, you never know when you might lose zero, so you always have to confirm it. So that's a bit of a journey, and even went through a couple of trigger upgrades for my MMP products. And that was probably the culmination of all the experience that I had from my pistol shooting up to last year, was getting comfortable with the process of taking it down to that point, and painstakingly following the instructions to making sure that I'm not doing anything or missing anything that would inhibit the function of the guns, of which at least now after a year, and through putting it through its paces, you know, hundreds of rounds basically. Those two are my favorite shooting guns, my two MMP 2.0 products with the Timney triggers. Now, sorry for getting offhand there, but that's basically where I mentioned that when it came to the Resolute, when I was looking at ARs at the time, and I guess it kind of goes back to when I got my first shotgun too, that I wanted something that was super simple, simple to operate, simple to break down, simple to clean. Those are pretty much what was my go-tos for even getting a shotgun in the first place, and not necessarily anything about the power or any type of nostalgia factor. It was really just the ease of use that got me into being comfortable enough to jump into doing anything with firearms in the first place on my own. So that was really my big deal. And the AR-15 for me was the polar opposite of a shotgun, like as far as the simplicity in mind, so to speak. And I just spent days on days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months of just doing passive research on the side, but really keeping myself in the pistol world, at least as far as my focus really went on at that time. Just because in 2019 I was more into the shotguns, but I was like, okay, the shotguns are relatively pretty straightforward. Then I got into the pistols, which I was like, yeah, once you break it down to its four major functioning components for basic cleaning, it's not really all that much to worry about besides refining your techniques. And really, probably with pistols, it's probably the easiest to get more complacent with, just because you could pocket carry. You could actually get it set up in a place on your person where you may even forget that it's there. Just being completely forthcoming on that. From sometimes when I carried, it was just like, felt like I wasn't carrying at all, which felt like a good thing, but also I always wanted to have some kind of presence of mind that my firearm was on me. So my mind was just absorbed in that world at the time for concealed carry and other topics, mostly revolving around handguns, really proper holsters and all that stuff. I was still in the midst of that journey, of which probably didn't conclude for me until the beginning of last year. So this is a process, is basically what I'm getting at. So when it came to the AR, I was just like, I don't think I'm smart enough for this. I think it's, like my best friend was a big Lego head, and he 3D prints on a smaller scale, but he's very mechanically minded, and that's the way I kind of separated myself with the AR at the time. That I was just like, yeah, I'm not. It's not that I don't understand it, but there's a lot of intricacies behind it, more so than what I was used to between the pistol and the shotgun. And I was just like, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm gonna get this anytime soon, but in time, I just got more comfortable with it, and I think a lot of my apprehension was that, what if I do something stupid enough to cause a catastrophic failure that may injure myself? Was really one of my main concerns. Probably due to a bunch of 300 blackout going into 5.56 chambers that I saw at the time as well, of which the one time I did see it happen with a Noveski owner, really solidified in my mind that the quality of the construction and quality of materials can make a big difference in, at least in that person's experience, where he put a 300 blackout through a 5.56 or into a 5.56 was chambered, but when it did detonate, the magazine shot out immediately. Everything was expelled between the explosion going forward and ejecting from the magazine well, and of course the sorry, I have to touch it to try to remember my wording exactly, but also out the chamber opening. Words are escaping me right now, but the chamber and port, I should say. So, but everything came out at least with minimal damage to the person that was operating, which impressed me at the time, and pretty much kind of put it a little bit of a goal for me, that I was like, okay, I'm good with Noveski, and let's just leave it there, right? Till I started doing more research, started seeing more things on the active self-protection channel, noticing a pattern of officers using Daniel defense rifles. Not that I don't believe it's standard issue like across the country or anything like that, but at least in certain engagements, that you just saw that rifle or the DDM4 just handle business straight up. And I kind of felt like that was a good standard, almost in the same level that you could consider a Glock to be a standard for a sidearm. Same thing I felt with the Daniel defense rifle. And I was just like, okay, this is my benchmark. If this could be used in a duty role, not unlike the M&P products, the M&P lineup, the Sport 2s, that type of deal for their rifles. But I really was gravitating more of the look of the full rail, free float barrel was really something that I felt like, hey, at least according to the platform, I want as little interference with the barrel as possible. I want the barrel to be as protected as possible. I really don't like the idea of an exposed barrel, even in terms of aesthetics, but also in the idea that really the most important factor, besides the bulk carrier group, which is the operation, but I feel even the only thing that could be considered more important than that is the barrel itself, because the whole design of the AR for me is that it lends itself to accuracy first. Probably what makes it the most dangerous is the ease of operation. That if you're talking that once it's fully assembled and you take a new shooter and you just tell them the controls and how to fire, it's good to go. It's very uncomplicated from just the user aspect. But in terms of, again, what is the purpose, or what is the driving goal of the AR platform? It's really, it lends itself to being super accurate, this side of a bolt action rifle, of which I'm not into that. I understand that for like big game hunting and for accuracy purposes, sure, but at least in the end of my mind, if I'm going to put myself in a certain camp, it's probably going to be on the tactical camp, minus my World War II era helmet. But I say that just because I'm not a hunter-driven, focused person. So, at least in my mind, if I'm going to get into a rifle, in all categories of rifle, I want something that will be more dedicated toward the idea of self-defense. Is practically where I'm getting at. So, in between that and trying to wrestle with the idea of trying to get something that is form-fitting to me, not that I was necessarily super interested in a 16-inch barrel. I would have liked something shorter, but I also want something that, and for no real tactical good reason in my mind, that I could see myself in this position, but the idea of the average, let's say 5.56 round, going out of a 16-inch barrel can get close to that 3,000 feet per second milestone in order to defeat, lower end body armor is a sticking point to me. Says a lot about the capability of the gun platform in itself. So I found that, and I still do hold that of some importance, even though it may not necessarily be practical, not as practical as, let's say, if I had at the time just got a 12.5-inch barrel with a pistol brace. But I did want to have that capability of that round, particularly, and there's something that I would say that makes the AR-15 shine. It is the 5.56 round. This is one of the few points that you'll ever hear me give willingly to FN. I find the FN fans to be as obnoxious, if not more obnoxious, than Glock fans. But I will give FN that them producing, or at least bringing to development, the 5.56 round as a NATO standard. It is my favorite round. I do love the capabilities of that cartridge, and thank you, FN. That's hopefully the last time you hear me say that, because I really can't stand the SCAR. Ugg boot rifles. That's also why I didn't get the SCAR, because frankly, I just didn't like the looks of it. But that and this is gonna be safe for a different rant that I'll come back to the Zero Delta, but a $3,000 gun with an A2 birdcage and a A2 pistol grip will never appeal to me. Especially at that price. I wouldn't be okay with that if it was $2,000, let alone. I'm not even sure if I'm okay with that when it even comes to sub 1,000 rifles. Different rant, but again, that's the perceived quality in my mind, that the more money I spend, the more I should see something get away from what would be considered mil-spec, M16 clones, that type of deal. So how did I end up getting with CMMG? So at least at that time when I was doing my research, in between work and just, kind of aimlessly searching what's around, I really kind of stuck to, and I only say this as a reference point just because it was so easy to find, and it's going to sound stupid, but I really stuck to kind of the meme tier list that were posted on Reddit for like Gucci tier or S tier, A tier, B tier, that kind of stuff. Or in general, what the box is for the Gucci tier list of AR manufacturers. While being fully aware that there are hundreds of AR manufacturers that I'm aware of, at least to some degree, not that I can count them on, but at least under searching, that it's generally stated that there's somewhere between, or at least above 200 different manufacturers of AR pattern rifles. So I'm not going to look through 200 different companies, but I did want to get a general gauge of what is relatively known to have a reputation, and how far does that reputation go with how much they charge, right? So again, I still had Daniel Defense as this benchmark in mind. So started from the bottom to the top is basically how it went. So yeah, I did knock off the usual suspects, let's say, of at the time, again in 2020, of PSA, Wyndham Armory, probably thinking of a different one. Oof, somebody's gonna get mad. I said, oh, I slipped in saying Radiant. That's at the top. I know. I'm sorry. Radical. Okay, words, I tell you. So yeah, Radical, and Anderson, let's leave it at there. So kind of scratched all those off just because at least at the time, more of their offerings were pretty much just all close to mil-spec, and I just really felt like that's not going to be my thing. If I knew mil-spec was going to be my thing, I would have just gone with something that was, hey, let me just find an M4 clone of some type and just leave it there and done deal. And that probably would have been FN at that time from what I was seeing, for something that was just as close to the military look as possible. And knowing that the FN chrome barrel, or no, cold hammer forged barrel, sorry, technical jargon and words, but the cold hammer forged barrel was has a very robust reputation behind it. So that was also in the back of my mind. And again, all of this is new to me, that I was just like overwhelming myself with all this information. So again, I'm just working my way up this list here, and then going past the F, D, C tier. And at the time, I believe CMMG, on the one I was looking at, was on the higher C tier, to be honest. So I did end up skipping it at the time because my friend was trying to push me more into Aero and BCM, right? And Aero was at the top of C at the time, and I believe BCM was somewhere in the B range. So I did look at them, and while I really had no particular issues about BCM, and I still think the Recce is a great rifle, just something on the value proposition, I guess that must have been at the time when people were just recommending their uppers instead of the complete rifle. Something about the value proposition just didn't settle with me. I can't tell you what exactly I was thinking at the time, but it may have been more or less around because at that time they weren't doing the bulk carrier group deal that they are doing now. But that being said, you also have to get one of their charging handles and all that. So I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it at the time. And more or less the same thing kind of went for Aero, that while I appreciate them doing their uppers and lowers at reasonable rates and having a stellar reputation, there were reports actually coming around that time, even with BCM as well and Aero, that they were having some QC issues, which of course COVID and all that. Okay, we'll just leave that as it is. But for me as a new customer, I wasn't trying to jump into anything other than with someone that had not a whole lot going on, no controversies, no not to say scandals, but no issues. And somewhere around that point, as I was really comparing them with the DDM4 that I was kind of had my eyes set on, but wasn't a super big fan of. I guess one thing that was holding me back was the trigger, just the standard trigger, and the fact that it would be well over $2,000 to upgrade to the Pro trigger that had an 18-inch barrel. I'm like, no, I kind of just want the 16-inch barrel with the Geisley trigger that they were offering at the time, but they only had paired with the 18-inch barrel. And it's like, okay, well, if I was a smarter person, I would just switch the trigger, but I'm not that handsy of a person. And again, trying to get into my first AR, I kind of just wanted to be done for me. So I was kind of at a crossroads there. And that being said, I kind of came to this epiphany that when it comes to all the rhetoric that revolves around government contracts, I'm really not one to hold high esteem that just because something has had a military trial or they have tons of military contracts, that this is an indicator of quality. I think that that's something that if I won't say that it's a non-factor, but I will say that it is debatable, right, for your applications. Because at least at the time, I was, even with the guns I was dealing with, it's like, even with the pistols that I had, it was just like people were just, I just was inundated with all these videos that I would look up that just revolved around torture tests. And it's just like, dude, I do not plan on dropping my pistol. I don't plan on dropping my light. I don't plan on dropping my red dot. Like anything revolving around a weapon, I'm not dropping it. And I may have taken that stance more or less because my pump shotguns were the first beginning purchases for me. And lesson 101 on pump shotguns, especially if they're loaded and the safety's off, even if the safety's on, really, don't drop them. So I just have this aversion to the whole side of torture testing things. That's just like, that's not relevant to me. I'm not in a battlefield. I'm not going to be trying to dive with my weapon in hand, or face a situation where I would have to use my rifle as a blunt instrument to accomplish some kind of goal, like breaking into through a window of some sort, or a windshield or whatever. So largely, I was trying to sift through all this information that is very rigorous as far as the idea of military trial or test. And I was just like, I had enough of that. So it drew this line in the sand for me that I was just like, I am done with the idea that I need a rifle that is only served in reputation because it made it through a tour. And probably more so than that, I'm also became a lot more sensitive that, hey, and especially this is 2020 we're talking about, if something was to happen, like it did happen here in Louisville, where we have civil unrest, and let's say I need access to some certain type of parts or what have you, I don't want to be beholden to a company that puts government interest first or federal interest first ahead of the civilian population. I want a company that is going to cater to civilians, for civilians, and not skimp on quality or focus for that matter. So I really just, again, drew that line in the sand that, if a company does business on a pretty large level, again, this is after I got my Glock 43, so that was standing, and the MPs were bought used, so let that go too. Outside of handguns, but more or less for the AR, just because it has more going on its functioning components that are more important, frankly, to me than a handgun. Now, I was just focused that I want a company that is not beholden to government interest. So and there you go back to BCM, and really with the Daniel defense, knocked them right off. Just because I felt like, hey, if anything ever happens that the government says, hey, stop selling to civilians, or put some kind of political pressure on them, that those companies will fold and default to the government, because that's their, not to say that whether I know or not, that's the biggest source of income, but that is their most powerful, let's say, ally, if it ever came to that. So I just didn't want to support any company that could align its interest away from its customer base, that being the civilian population. So that's where my head is, and this is strictly me speaking as an American. For some reason, I have maybe about 4% of viewers that are Italian. To anybody that's listening to my videos or watching from across the world, welcome. Thank you. Awesome. I'm actually, so happy to see that. But again, this is strictly from a United States citizen perspective. So that being said, once I kind of made that line, I could start saying, okay, this is what I am focused on, and I want something that I could depend on as a consumer, private consumer, for, let's say, the years to come. So that being said, that did bring me back to CMMG, because, and to some degree Arrow as well. But again, because I wasn't seeing complete builds from Arrow, for at least in a complete package rifle setup, apart from a complete lower and upper, I just felt like, what did I want? And okay, you have the one that has the standard A2 furniture, you have the one that has the BCM furniture, and you have the one that has the Magpul furniture, but also, some other differences and the barrel quality that I was just like, this is too much for me as a beginner. So the CMMG thing happened, and I just went into researching at their Resolute series between the 100, 200, and 300 series, right? And that was more appealing to me just because I kind of got behind the concept of, oh, okay, your 100 is the more basic, the 200 has some features, but some niceties, and then the 300, it's as much niceties that they could throw at it in the market. And in particular, one of the big ones for me was having a Geisley trigger just straight up from the jump. So the other thing that happened was that I just said to myself, hey, at least in my state of Kentucky, instead of trying to source something that could be found nationwide, I need to, even if it ends up costing me a little more, let me just find something in Kentucky that is local to me and just see what it is. Because at this point, the Noveski was out of stock that I had originally looked at over the summer, or really spring and summer. And the DDM4 had just went out of stock at my local store, at my local gun range. So I was just like, okay, I'm just going to chase down and see what CMMG products are, not to say near me, but at least within the state range, right? And only found this one here, which was a 300 special edition. And battle worn titanium. I want to say I got that Cerakote, right? And I really like the idea that, hey, there was also Cerakote options, that, it's not just another scary black rifle. I mean, it still ended up being a scary rifle. Even the people that haven't even seen it, just by my friends being surprised that I even got a rifle, and even just by the notion of it, they were scared of it, which of course those are not my friends anymore. But I ended up finding this at in Frankfurt, which was maybe about an hour and a half for me on that drive, maybe closer to 2 hours, something like that. But it may be the capital, but it felt like driving up to the boonies, actual hills and whatnot, grassy area. And the store that I did get it from ended up looking like it was just a redone house made into a gun store. Kind of funny. But that's where this rifle was, and 1800 at the time. But one of the also sticker points to me was that even when I was looking at just regular bolt action rifles, I was just like, why is it that the bolt action rifles, because of the focus toward hunting, all come with scopes? Or not all of them, but a lot of them come with scopes. But at least at the time, it wasn't until 2021 really that when I looked back into the market, I'm like, oh, now you guys want to start throwing red dot combos on things. But at this time, the only one gun that I found that was doing red dot combinations at the time was Radical, and I already had wrote that off. So again, this was the only one that did come with a good quality red dot that, of course, now I put on a different rifle. But that being said, that's what it originally came with. And between the comp break, however you wish to word it, the Cerakote, the trigger, the red dot, and CMMG's reputation, and even now, certain times I've gone back over the years, I've never seen someone even report on having some kind of issue with CMMG when it comes to um, this the build quality or the build in itself, or any QC issues that would come up immediately on any of the Resolute rifles. Has it probably happened? Sure, but they probably just took it to the store sent it to CMMG fixed it, and that was taken care of. At least the only major complaints I could find for CMMG at the time were based mostly around their lead times for people that had specific builds in mind. Not my deal. I'm not playing that game. I just want my complete rifle, get out the store, which was basically what happened here. So I just felt like that was just a compelling deal that, at least at the time, pretty much matched, not so much, not saying capability, but it matched more of the material quality minus the cold hammer forged barrel of the DDM4. But I had the trigger, and I'm not the type of person that I'm going to put in the kind of trigger time to wear out a barrel that would be of concern to me. So that's how I ended up with the Resolute in a nutshell. But it came through a lot of back and forth, a lot of research, a lot of trying to get comfortable with the platform, and people reassuring me that I could figure it out. And eventually I did, but even then, after purchasing it, I'd probably say it still was after 2 years that I got really comfortable in taking everything apart, like stripping down the bulk carrier group to its essential components for proper cleaning. And it took me a while to get really comfortable with that. But the build quality, the QC behind it, I think as a complete rifle, I have no complaints. If companies out there do it better, that's great. But it works for me, or at least I probably shouldn't say that. How can I put it? How's the opposite of how I want to say that? I haven't exceeded the capabilities of the rifle. So I work well with it. It's probably the better way to put it. Because I don't want to get into this kind of good enough type of deal, but when I say good enough, I mean, just good enough as an expression for, hey, you need to pay a certain amount of money to get into a rifle that will, not necessarily to say that it will impress others, but at least will have some kind of credibility of, or a reputation for reliability or perceived quality, for that matter. So that being said, let's drop all that noise, because now we flash forward 3 years later, and all the notions of you have to pay a certain amount. Let's say if you wanted to get into something decent, at least it's mostly recognized that, let's say verbatim, 1,500 to 2,500 is kind of the sweet spot, right? So that covers between your BCM Recce, probably all the way up to your possibly, don't quote me on it, but let's say Blackout Defense complete rifle. So it covers that gambit, so to speak. So that being said, how how did I even come into with the discussion of even having a second rifle to begin with? We're going to transition now to the Zero Delta. And that really came after some reflection after I told the complete story about the CMMG, and really just being super grateful of having that and that defensive encounter that I had at my home, that thankfully there was nothing legally speaking that needed to be accomplished through court or through the police or through lawyers or any type of physicality other than the imposing threat or defensive threat, if that's a thing, of presenting my rifle. So, at least that being said, I did feel that, hey, I do have multiple pistols. I have a backup shotgun for which the Mossberg Shockwave is the shotgun that I love. But if I ever got into a defensive incident for that, that doesn't mean that's going to be the rifle that gets the shotgun that gets turned in. Hopefully that doesn't get used against me. That being said, I kind of felt like I needed a backup to the Resolute. And not to say that the Resolute couldn't do what it did for me before on the defensive incident, but I need something that is not as precious to me. And I really hate to say that, but it is an inanimate object, and I don't like the idea of having some kind of like object permanence that something like that would remain in my life. Is almost the same thing that would, same reason I will never get a pistol that is, let's say, on the level of a Bull Armory, like spending over $1,000 for a pistol. Hell, even over 600 is kind of crossing the line to me. That I'm just like, if I get into a defensive incident with this and it ends up in the hands of my local constabulary and it has to go through a process of it being admitted as evidence and it's something that's nice, I'm not going to see that again. So, and I probably hold that to be true for my Resolute as well. If something happens, I don't see a world in which they would readily wave that off and give that back to me. I mean, hell, if Kyle Rittenhouse couldn't get his rifle back, even after he was completely cleared of all charges, which he never should have been charged to begin with, and his rifle looked pretty basic, that, what chance would I stand on the court, against the court system and it not being high profile? And I know there was more of a political agenda behind that. I get that. It's not the same. Cool. But at least on my level, I don't hold on to the idea that if something would happen and it gets confiscated, that I'm going to end up getting it back. I just don't account for that. So I began just digging around onto, hey, if I was going to do this over again like I did in 2020, but now 2023, what do I want? Now, having the experience that I have now and seeing how the market has changed a little bit, what are the features that I want out of a rifle, right? So certain things come up like ambi controls. I want an AR that is focused on what was something that I neglected from an AR or took for granted, is that even the platform itself has a focus on being light. So it's like, I want something light, or at least has a focus towards it. I did kind of want something that, I don't want to say lacks frills, but maybe I don't need a 2-stage trigger, or maybe I don't need a comp. and or compensator, if you want to say the whole word. But also going back to what do I feel was important? The barrel. So that was something that I did stress, and I was like, what would I like to see now? I would like to see now that 223 Wild and 1-8 Twist start being more standard. I think the idea of it really comes around to most of the, at least what I get to find in the market for either 556 or 223, that most of the grains that are readily available are between 55 to 64. And you should really have a barrel that takes advantage of that. I have a 1-7 here on the CMMG, 1-7 twist rate, and a 556 NATO chambering, which of course favors over 70 grains, which I don't have a large supply of, and nor is it readily available in my area. So again, it shoots everything else just fine, but not necessarily what the rifle is truly capable of, especially when you're pushing distance. But that being said, not a real big issue, or at least not the biggest issue. But I did want something that could try to take more advantage of those mid-range weights for that caliber of bullet. So at least that being said, I kind of just went back to the drawing board again, and kind of threw out that tier list. I had an idea of it at first, but then I kind of threw it out, just thinking to myself, there has to be something that is less mainstream and really still has good quality, but doesn't have a large buzz around it. I really like the idea of supporting a smaller business or not so well established, and really kind of creating my own experience out of that as well. And I mean, I kind of already did catch that with the CMMG, because I wouldn't necessarily say that it is a common household AR manufacturer, so to speak, if that's even a phrase to say. But let's just say it's more unique. I have yet to run into another CMMG owner, period, live in person. But everything else you could imagine, sure. But to some degree, I do like having something that's unique. But again, I just wanted to stick to what I could find with that 223 Wild barrel, that 1-8 twist, those ambi controls, and a not mil-spec trigger. Let's call it there. So those are the features that I was looking for, right? And of course, a forward assist. Again, back to the Kyle Rittenhouse manner, I insist on a forward assist. Don't care otherwise. If someone doesn't care for it, that's cool. You want to stick with the Eugene Stoner principles of it's not needed, that's cool too. I like having it. Don't plan on using it unless I need to, but if I ever needed to, I will be citing Kyle Rittenhouse as the example of why I insisted on it in the first place. And hopefully I'll never get to a position where I will need to use it. But also, nor do I feel that it is something that will be of any hindrance whatsoever. One of those things that it won't be in the way, even if I got into a situation and that was a non-factor. Doesn't hurt to have it, at least on my opinion on the matter, but do as you wish. But that being said, I did want to revisit back on trying to find something that was not a 16-inch barrel. So really, I started from 13.7 and really spent a lot of time digging on whether the Sons of Liberty Gunworks, I forget the exact full name, but let's just call it their M4, on their 13.7 pin and welded barrel was like, that was the other, let's say, benchmark for me for what I was looking for. And it didn't really hit on everything that I was looking for, but close enough. So I just started there, and then just researching around again on who's doing this. That really the big thing was the ambi thing. And I mean, so I went from jumping to that, then I'm trying to think again, what was my more or less train of thought. And this one kind of went through a lot faster than it did for the Resolute, just because I was more experienced at this time. So I kind of just went on hitting different things. But I did touch back on certain things. So I did work my way all the way up to Radiant, all the way down to Radical, as far as looking into different companies and what they're doing in the market now versus from 3 years ago when I first started doing research. So in that sense, I kind of did go through the tier list again on that meme, but also just keeping the eye around for other things that I'm not too familiar with. Visiting past videos of, what's underrated in the market. That's how I came around to unbranded AR again, or unbranded AR, generally speaking. And I'm having a hard time now thinking of what else I definitely looked at. I want to say that I had in mind, there was a Smith & Wesson Sport 2 that I had in mind, just because it was branded under, or at least it was a surplus of the Kentucky State Police. So I kind of did toy with the idea of like, hey, maybe my backup rifle should be, incognito with the police, but I let that go and they sold out of all of those, that classic firearms. So I just dropped that whole thing. It was already sold out even when I was looking for another rifle, but it was still in the back of my mind. So I'm trying to think what else was there. And I think, so then I ended up looking at the PSA Saber line, because we're talking, at least this is 2023, so we're talking back from March till March to June. That was the rage, the PSA Saber lineup. So I really just did a deep dive on PSA, and I came away more impressed from the company itself than just their rifle lineup or just their products in itself. Just a real based company that is strong on the 2A. And if I was going to do it all over again, would I have done it all over again with PSA? No. If I was going to do it all over again, I probably would have gave myself a really compelling reason to go IWI, and I would have had a Zion SPR with the 18-inch barrel, and a Zion that is just a 16-inch standard rifle, which I believe usually cost around, maybe for the SPR, that's the way it's branded, but the 18-inch barrel is $1,200 to $1,300, and then the basic rifle is usually $800 to $900, respectively. So, and that goes back again to what I said before about this idea that I had in mind from the $1,500 to $2,500. It's not necessary. And especially when you know what you're looking for, it's definitely not necessary. But then I went back to revisiting the IWI idea, right? Along with the time I was looking into the PSA Saber lineup. And every time I settled on the idea of something, it just didn't, click with me that, is this really the thing? Especially with PSA, I really hesitated just because of the QC issues that they are plagued with, really. And IWI, again, that may go back to that point I said about the military previously, but really it just didn't have all the features that maybe I prioritized back in 2020, which I was just looking for like standard kind of tried and true 1-7 5.56, not trying to do anything too frilly, but want as customized, already out the box, than for me to do anything, or at least touched on major points. And IWI, as great as they are, it just didn't hit me. It just didn't, really give me the punch needed to say like, oh, okay, this feels like, something that I would get, like, personal to me. It just felt like, it would feel like I just got another one. I just got one just like everybody else. And that tends to be a little bit of my driving point, is that I can't say I've done this with every purchase, but I've always had this this need to try to be unique in some way, or at least if I'm going to be looking at something, I want to take the less traveled option, so to speak. So I just went back to the drawing board again after I took off with the PSA and with the Sons of Liberty Gunworks, and then ended up looking into POF, which I was like, why is it that I see nothing when it comes to the Wonder rifle? Now, this was before I even had any idea that basically it was only like 2 modifications away from the Minuteman. Stupid me, until, thank you Vegeta for pointing that out. And I was just like, okay, that was dumb. This is why I don't see any reviews on it, because it basically is a Minuteman. But I was just really caught up on this idea, like, this Wonder rifle, why is it so heavily discounted now that, and nobody really like kind of bats a second eye at it? I think the white one is going around closer to maybe around the 1200 mark, where it really starts at maybe around 16, 17, 1800-ish. Don't quote me on that. But it's a lot cheaper in the market right now than what the MSRP is. So I was just like, man, this is really interesting. It's really unique. And then I can't say I necessarily felt a certain way about it, but I kind of was like too much on the fence. Like, do I really vibe with the company overall? And it's like, I kind of do, but it's also like I kind of don't. Like, I don't know, something just didn't catch me in the same way that CMMG did, as far as like, they're pretty active in making their own videos. They also, have people like Johnny B that really hypes up their products and whatnot. So I just think there is a certain amount of hype that goes along with CMMG that wasn't so readily felt with POF, or at least at one time maybe it was, but after the owner passed, it simmered down from there, unfortunately. And I want to say that's probably a little bit of my reluctance that happened with Noveski as well. After I became more aware about the company dynamics in itself versus the product, right? Because it's not always necessarily just about the product itself, but maybe that's how I ended up here with Zero Delta, was that I was just like, okay, I'm not focused on a particular thing, so let me refocus, get away from the whole barrel thing, and just focus on who provides the ambi controls, right? So I did see someone throw out Zero Delta, and then I dismissed it as soon as I saw it, just because I thought I saw something that said something about like the quality not being up to the standard of like, obviously, of like a Radian lower or whatever. So I was just like, okay, fine, whatever, leave that alone. So then I got really stuck with, at this point, talking about, I got stuck with LWRCI. Yeah, LWRC, whichever one applies to you. But really stuck on, they got the lower right. They got it right, okay? And I am not in love with the upper. I am not into this fluted barrel thing. I'm not into this partially exposed barrel thing. And, it just really was like, irking me. So I'm just like, okay, now I got the lower that I'm interested in. And I'm like, is there any idea of like, has anyone ever paired a lower like this with a different upper? And I mean, I really went down this rabbit hole of getting a LWRC lower with a BCM upper, of course, with their bulk carrier group being included, buying their charging handle, and made in all of that together, right? So even at best with all of that pricing, I was looking at a $1,500 rifle. Once everything was like kind of like all pieced together with everything I had in mind at that point of what I would put on it. And I'm like, really, 1,500? I'm like, am I really gonna try to, you know, get, that was a little too close to the same sentiment that I had with my CMG, that I was like, I don't want to turn that Frankenstein that I had in mind into my more favored one. And I was just like, and also what knocked me out of it as fast as I got into it was just that if I ever ran into any type of issues with the rifle in itself, it's like, do I have the technical expertise now to just take it apart and say, hey, this company, you need to fix this, or that company, you need to fix that? And it's just like, no. I still rather deal with a one-stop shop, basically. So that being said, I didn't want to try to create my own project, so to speak, even though I only saw one person on Reddit that had something like that I had in mind, that he swore that everything cleared and worked, but there was a little bit of questioning on his camera angles and whatnot. And it's just like, yeah, I'm not going to get into this. That's a bad rabbit hole. Dropped everything. And I was just like, okay, let me go back to the Zero Delta thing. So I was like, let me just start fresh. Let me do some research on their website and then go from there. So everything for that marketing line really pushed toward the Ready series, that I was like, okay, it's cool, but I don't really vibe with it. This fully enshrouded type of setup, because we're talking, at least at this point now, that a lot of kind of the focus has been revolving around not necessarily like, I want to say trying to be cool, but maybe being different. And I can't really say it's for the sake of being different, because a lot of it in the market tends to be more skewing towards suppressors, and I'm not into that. I'm holding out that the NFA gets thrown out sometime, hopefully in the near future, maybe years from now, that I'll be able to just run the suppressor happily. But will I have to deal with an adjustable gas block and all this other stuff that may come into it, at least under the time being now, with the stamps and all that? And it's like, I don't want to get into that, right? Which was the whole reason why I even looked into the 13.7, ended up at 14.5 pinned and welded devices. Didn't even know that flash hiders had sometimes issues with ringing due to the harmonics. And you know what? Glad to have learned a lot during that research, but already my mind was fried. So once I looked at the Ready series, I was just like, okay, this ain't for me. Cool, but let me see what else they have. And then I was like, okay, the only other thing I saw was the Zulu, right? And the Zulu looks, that's where I saw that. I was like, okay, the Zulu is really their more, let's call it contemporary brand that's probably has some of the features of the Ready series, but it's closer to the mil-spec options that you see from unbranded AR, which are pretty much every time that I saw like a feature on unbranded AR that didn't revolve around either their carbon series, which is cool, but again, exposed barrels, not for me. But kind of revolved around trying to do something more innovative than, I'm not, trying to jump head on. But that being said, after I looked at the Zulu, I was like, hold up, on their website, they're talking about the Zulu too. And I was just like, I can't find this anywhere. And this was even more so than the POF. I mean, POF Minuteman has some reviews, but like, I was really thinking of the Wonder. And I was just like, okay, the Wonder has, you know, 1 or 2 reviews on it. But of course, that's because it's just basically an offshoot of the Minuteman. Not really a big deal. But I was just like, yeah, is there any other rifle that I've seen that besides this Zulu 2 that I'm just like, not only can I find nobody else selling it, I can't find anybody else that's even talked about it other than, let's say, maybe a SHOT Show type of article that just went over the features and that was it. So looking at this Zulu 2 page, I was just like, okay, yeah, I could, even when I'm thinking of the ambient controls, I should be more specific that what I'm really looking forward to or looking for is the capability of being able to just go on ahead and having a single button to just release the bolt that is not just on the left side, but also on the right. Really what I'm looking for. And that's what it has. And I was like, okay, you know, this is fair. Now, I don't know the designation that they have for the Ready series, but this implementation of lightening the rail, I was just like, okay, you know, deleting the Picatinny section and for most of it in the middle. I was like, well, I can't necessarily say that's my thing, but you know, I'm willing to give it a try. You know, let's see what it does. You know, in my head thinking before I actually purchased it. A2 bird cage, okay, fine. I'm looking at a price quote of $600, not a big deal. And everything else lined up, the 1-to-8 twist, the 223 wild barrel, and the, I don't want to say it's a ergo grip, but kind of this, you know, more straightforward angle that I do like from a rifle. There you go there. And of course the Mission First Tactical stock, which I already have on an undisclosed item. So we'll leave it there. Thank you, NFA. Thank you, AFT. Flipping idiots. But then I kind of found what I was looking for here, and I was just like, okay, it's basic, and I had a working coupon code, and the coupon code I think probably worked a little too well because it took off $60. So I'm like, okay, I'm looking at a as quoted price of $540 minus the shipping and taxes and whatnot. And then I'm like, okay, the only place where I could buy it is off of their website for Zero Delta. And the kicker, and I know this usually gets me when I'm like in a regular store, but literally 1 remaining, at least before you choose different Cerakote options that add maybe $100 or $150 to the base price. And I was just like, okay, now this is the exact opposite of the Resolute. Now I'm like, okay, under 600 and 1 remaining, and you know, fairly brand new in the market, no videos on it whatsoever. And I mean, besides no civilian purchasing or from a buyer's perspective videos on it other than the company presentation of it. And I was just like, you know what? Yeah, let's give it a shot. QC issues be damned under buying something under $1,000. But I kid you not, I get more compliments on this damn $600 rifle than I do this, you know, $1,800 Lovely from 2020. Ain't that a shame? Well, they're both nice, I'll say. But I mean, of course, the differences are the differences, and I'll get into that. Or actually, no, I won't get into that in a different video. I'll say it briefly here, just to wrap up this video, really. after I came to this. Now, that being said, yeah, you may run into QC issues. I ran into a QC issue that my Zulu 2 did not come with its AMB selector, of which they sent me separately. I got it put on, no issues there. And if anything, all that did was send me on a little bit of a rampage, because here's what it comes down to. When it comes to pricing in this market, I think inevitably speaking, the more that you end up spending on getting into any type of AR-15, if you want to see value for your dollar, you need to buy things that are getting more away for your money. They get further away from the mil-spec standard. This being like an example of a mil-spec standard, just your standard charging handle. There are things that you may end up seeing that when you don't pay the ultra high tax of what firearms can be, you know, we're talking at the $3,000 range, that your quality will depend more on how much effort the company put into it. And the more unique your rifle is compared to what you could get from the look of a standard M4, unless you're dealing with, let's say, Colt as that standard, and maybe they're not even that standard anymore for some people, I get it. But let's just use them as a benchmark. That's generally speaking 1,000 to 1,500, you know, just ballpark in there. But outside of that standard, as you go higher from there, you should justify that with parts that are not on the mil-spec territory anymore. And one of the driving reasons I say that is because those are the things that could get annoying in time. Like for me, it wasn't until I came to that realization that, at least with this other mil-spec charging handle, that, you know, this activation that I have with it and the use of it with everything else that can be seen as an upgrade on the rifle is not cohesive. And really, the mil-spec was kind of meant to work together in harmony. And that's a great thing. My friend has one from, I don't want to say Diamondback, Double Star AR. That is really straight up M4. Cool. I mean, minus the 16-inch barrel, but the profile being more A2 styled in all its things. And it really harmonizes all of its working components together. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that in its standard in and itself, but the mixing and matching of certain things being upgraded versus not is really where I see some frustration, at least in my case, that, hey, if I'm going to be spending over $1,500, I want something unique. And if I start seeing things that are unique under $1,500, I'm going to say that it's still worth a shot. But that being said, will there be certain differences that you may have to deal with? Absolutely. You may have to deal with a little bit of construction differences, that they style things in their own way or they built things their own way that you may have to pay more attention to. Or you may see, like with your cotter pin, that, you know, it may not be as smooth as another, or let's say your selector switch may not be as clicky or positive in its action as another. And generally speaking, I won't say that, will you need to upgrade more on your $600 rifle? It depends on you. It depends on what you get from the onset. You may get something that you're trying to change from the onset to fit what you actually want, but you should resolve that with your initial purchase. It's how I feel. So, would I change anything of my purchases? No. I feel fine with them. But I will say that looking back on it now, I do wish that I had more of the clarity of mind to say that, hey, what I am looking for is going to be unique to this company. And let's say if that company was Blackout Defense, they kind of test on everything that has their own spin on it. And that's pretty much what I'm looking for there now. Why do I not own one? It's not for me. Things that are past $2,000 in my book need to be on 4 wheels. Straight up. I'm not crossing that line. That is car territory. If I got $2,000 to drop on something, I need to drop it on my car. That's, just a hard line that I'm not going to cross easily. Even with the other considerations I had said earlier, but they were considerations, not purchases. But that being said, that could be also a different talk for night vision, but construct an idea of what you want before trying to spend money. Because I think probably the biggest waste that someone could do is trying to spend money on something and not getting what they want, and then trying to transform it into something that they want without, let's say, without really coming to the conclusion of, what is your end goal? Is your end goal just aesthetic? Is your end goal function? And in my case, I say it's a little bit of both, but know that about yourself before getting into something like this. And that way you could probably end up with a purchase that the worst thing that I would say as a purchase is that you end up with a purchase and then you start saying to yourself, this is past my capabilities, or I don't see myself using this, therefore I will sell it. That's waste. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to the Tale of the Two ARs. If anything about this resonates with you, let me know. Drop a comment, drop a like. But thank you for your time. Sorry to make this so long, but I did plan on making a little bit of a rant about this, just to talk a little bit about the origins of the two, about my thought processes of them in general, and in conclusion, how I feel about them now, of which I'm fairly happy. Thank you. See ya.